All right, so now we know what this is. This is the Chinese flag. But it has a particular meaning, and this is what we need to remember. These 4 stars, they represent what was called the block of 4 great classes, the block of 4 classes. And it was the peasants, it was the workers, it was the middle peasants, those are like small farmers, people who owned their own land, and it was the national capitalists. And the Communist Party unified all of them. And that's what this big star here, that stands for the Communist Party. And the Trotskyites and the ultra-left elements, they looked at the Chinese Revolution when they were victorious in 1949, and they said, well, that's not real communism. That's not real Marxism. Marxism is a dictatorship of the proletariat, and you're talking about a block of 4 classes. That's not real. That doesn't count. But the Chinese communists, they had a response. And what was their response? And they said, well, China, the majority of our population are peasants, and the main contradiction is imperialism. So we have created a block of 4 classes. But it is real socialism because it is led by the Communist Party. And they said the Communist Party has a proletarian ideology. Proletarian ideology. You guys can sit down now. Where does the word proletarian come from? Well, we have to go back to ancient Rome, don't we? Does anyone know what the word proletarian literally means? It actually literally means one who has children. That is the definition of a proletarian. That's really what it means. The class, the ones who procreate. And the reason that was the term used for certain people in ancient Rome is in Rome you had slave owners and you had slaves, and the proletarians were neither slaves nor masters. And all they had were their children. They didn't own any land, they didn't own any property, but no one else owned them. They were the class that had nothing but their children. The only way they could have property is if they had children. Your children were considered to be part of your property. And the proletariat had never existed before until ancient Rome. You know, in other societies, you know, you have slaves, you have masters, you have serfs, you have landowners. There'd never been a proletariat before. And that's why when great kings from all over the world, when Cleopatra and others visited Rome, they were shocked because they knew that Rome was the capital of the world. This was the capital of the modern world, the center of this global empire. But they would see homeless people on the streets. They would say, how can this be? How can this be? Well, that's because when you have proletarians, you have homeless people. Because if the proletarian can't sell their labor, they can't survive. And so this great city had a big problem of all these crowds of desperately poor and homeless people. And Julius Caesar, part of the way he built up his power is he became a champion of the proletariat. And he started passing laws to help the proletariat and things like that. And that's part of why he was killed. This is what you have to remember about Rome. See, back in Rome, you know, we understand, you know, they had the polytheism, where they believed in different gods. And the way Rome was set up was that every section of society, they had their own rites and religious practices. You know, the navy of Rome, they worshiped the god Neptune, and they had a special temple for the god of the ocean, Neptune, and they had special rituals that only sailors would engage in because they were worshiping the god Neptune. There were parts of the military that worshiped Mars, who was the god of war, and they had certain ceremonies they would engage in, and these were called the mystery cults, right? It was based on your profession. You prayed to a certain god, you engaged in certain rituals. There were certain teachings that you learned as you became, if you were a sailor for a few more years, you'd learn more about the legend of Neptune and his life. And these were called the mystery religions, or the mystery cults. This is how Rome was set up, as they had this. And as the proletariat in Rome started organizing and started withholding their labor and saying to the employers, you know, the pipe fitters and the bricklayers, they started to develop their own mystery religion. A lot of them were from Greece. A lot of them were Jews from Palestine. And when they would get together and organize as the proletariat, they started to worship their own God. And they started to have their own mystery religion, if you will call it that. And they started to worship Jesus the carpenter. Woo! This is a historical fact. Go read The Foundations of Christianity by Karl Kautsky. Christianity as a religion began as the political expression of the Roman proletariat. That's what it began as. The proletarians were asserting their rights and fighting back against their employers. They developed their own mystery religion. They worshipped a craftsman just like they were. A lot of them were Jews from Palestine. And they began to organize and to fight for the rights of the proletariat. And, as we know, back in ancient Rome, the Romans were not particularly thrilled about this, you know, and that Christians were being persecuted, etc. But after the Christians continued, and after so many of them had been fed to lions, and so many of them had been burned at the stake, and it still existed, there started to be some within the Roman ruling elite who started to say, well, maybe there's parts of this Christianity thing that we can co-opt for ourselves. We have this problem with homeless children. These Christians, they build orphanages. So maybe we could find some good Christians to build orphanages and deal with this homeless children problem, And all over the empire, we have all these people fighting against us. And when they rally against us, they always have their own God they rally around. But these Christians, they believe in only one God. So we could outlaw all the other gods and just have one God. And so you saw Christianity being co-opted and adjusted and taken from being a revolutionary movement and turned into a mechanism for stabilizing the empire. And the Christians, when the early Christians were talking, they were talking about how one day Jesus was going to return and he was going to tear down the empire. And they were going to create a society where the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And those who were loyal reigned for 1,000 years. However, as Christianity was getting watered down and adjusted, it started to become, you should obey the Roman Empire because, look ahead to the next life. Think about the next life, be obedient and submissive. And Christianity was being watered down and adjusted to serve the needs of the Roman Empire. And if you think about it, that's a lot like something that's happened to our movement. There are elements that have taken socialism, the movement of the proletariat, and turned it into a mechanism for trying to stable their empire. You think about Jesus Christ. How would Jesus Christ feel if he returned now to see a church with a Ukrainian flag supporting the neo-Nazis in it? But then, dare I go there?
Go there.
How would Lenin or Stalin or William Z. Foster or Gus Hall feel if they saw the disgraceful organization that calls itself the Communist Party USA? So much evil is being done in the name of our movement right now. What began as a movement to liberate the proletariat and destroy empires has been hijacked as a mechanism for trying to stabilize their empire. And people say, well, Caleb, don't be sectarian, don't be divisive, don't talk about this. We have a responsibility to talk about this. We have absolutely a responsibility to talk about this. If you want to read some angry writing, go and read the writings of Vladimir Lenin when World War I was breaking out. Because World War I would not have happened if it weren't for socialists who sold out and let it happen. Right. And if the socialist movement had stuck to its principles and said, we'll never send workers to kill other workers, World War I wouldn't have happened. But they sold out, they abandoned their principles, and 20 million workers were sent to their deaths. And if you read Lenin's writings, this is what he says. Neither we nor anyone else can calculate precisely what portion of the proletariat is following or will follow the social chauvists and opportunists. This will be revealed only by the struggle, and it will be definitely decided only by the socialist revolution. And it is therefore our duty, if we wish to remain socialists, to go down lower and deeper to the real masses.
Amen.
This is the whole meaning and the whole purport of the struggle against opportunism. By exposing the fact that the opportunists and social chauvinists are in reality betraying and selling out the interests of the masses, that they are defending the temporary privileges of a minority of workers, that they are vehicles for bourgeois ideas and influences, that they are really allies and agents of the bourgeoisie, we teach the masses to appreciate their true political interests and to fight for socialism and for the revolution, all through the long and painful vicissitudes of imperialist war and imperialist armistices. The only Marxist line in the world labor movement is to explain to the masses the inevitability and the necessity of breaking with opportunism, and to educate them for revolution by waging a relentless struggle against opportunism, to utilize the experience of war to expose the utter vileness of national labor politics. So when we have a situation like this, where the imperialists are stirring us up for war against Russia, and we see organization after organization and entity after entity that speaks in the name of socialism supporting that, it is our duty to go lower and deeper to the real masses to expose the opportunists. That is what our job is. And it's not our job to try and please them. And it's not our job to try and go to them and accommodate them and be part of them. It is our job to go lower and deeper to the real masses to expose the opportunists. That is our job. We should be knocking on doors in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Kentucky and Minneapolis and wherever to tell people about why to oppose the synthetic left. That's what our job should be. Out of the movement! Out of the movement! Out of the movement! Out of the movement! Out of the movement!